But first, the former ACTU president, former Labor MP Jenny George, has now gone public with some home truths about energy policy. And the ever-smart George has underscored a point I've been making here as well. Now, she's warning an election in March could enable the Albanese government to hide its key intentions on energy policy, including its 2035 emissions targets that are set to be released in February and its default market offer on power prices. That's because if the Prime Minister calls a March election, he goes into caretaker mode in February. And if in caretaker, these new targets get pushed off until after you have voted. George says that, and I quote, the specific pledge to cut $275 from household power bills by 2025 was repeated on 97 occasions, and that was the first of Labor's broken promises. Now, this is not a former Liberal calling out the lies. This is Labor royalty. She also says that if Labor has successfully lobbied for Australia to host the 2026 UN Climate Conference, possibly to be confirmed this week at the current COP gathering in Azerbaijan, that would mean, and I quote her again, the Albanese government will have failed to read the room in pursuing a vanity project in the midst of a cost of living crisis. Now, by God, this is a vanity project. Even now at the Azerbaijan meeting, the whole climate conference has descended into a circus. Our delegation's full of bureaucrats. Knowing what it's cost in the past, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars here in business class flights and hotel rooms. Then have a look who's actually there. Labor's new best mate, former Liberal Treasurer Matt Keane, Energy Minister Chris Bowen, and there, sitting amongst all these climate-conscious countries of the world, will be the Taliban from Afghanistan, the very same terrorists that we have fought for 20 years as they harbour the likes of Osama bin Laden. Now we're all sitting around the table with them talking emissions? Give me a break. But back to this missive today in The Australian from Jenny George. Now, as you'd expect from a former union leader, Labor grandee, there's a swipe at the coalition for not yet releasing a costed energy policy. Fair enough, I'd say to Jenny George. But the guts of her statement is that the Albanese government would be, and I quote, failing in its commitment to transparency and accountability were it not to be upfront before the election about its own 2035 targets, about its own whole-of-system costings, which it's never released, even if it has them, and about its draft 2025 power price increases. We'll need to be alert, says Jenny George, to the possibility of missing crucial information about the energy transition during the caretaker period. Now, you can say that again. Today, the Prime Minister being coy about election dates.
Well, look, I'm focused on governing. That's what I'm focused on, and I'll leave the speculation to others.
But if there's no possibility of a federal election till May, as he's repeatedly said, why is the WA Labor Premier now trying to move his March election to avoid a federal clash? Today, the Prime Minister, though, gave away more than I think he realised. Certainly more than most in the media have picked up with this statement. Now, I want you to listen carefully.
The election, I've said the whole way through, will be in 2025. It will be called April or before.
April or before. Or before. That's the first time he said that today. Now, I say it again, he will have an early election because he must. He must have an early election. That's his best chance to survive. He has to bury these new climate targets. He has to bury the decade of deficits in his upcoming March budget. And he has to get to the polls before the energy and climate wars are turbocharged by the incoming President Donald Trump. That's why the Prime Minister wants an election before he can't avoid the truth about what Labor's policies are doing to your power prices and what harm they will do in the future should he get re-elected.